I'm here this evening to introduce to you an Alexander Hamilton winner as well, Tom Smith. But before I do that, I'm sure some of you may have noticed that while this is a black tie event, I'm not in black tie. My tuxedo didn't fit. I love being here at the Manhattan Institute. I've not had much relationship with the Institute over the years, except indirectly. I always think of it as being sort of a combination of the Wall Street Journal, the University of Chicago economists, and supply-side politicians. In fact, the one get-together I remember hearing about all the time was my dear friend Bob Bartley, who was then the predecessor. The predecessor of Paul Gigot, and my colleague for many, many years and my mentor, Bob Mundell, and very close dear friend of mine and an usher in my wedding, the supply-side economist, a supply-side politician named Jack Kemp, who I believe was also Paul Ryan's mentor as well in politics. But you know, the Manhattan Institute is more than just politicians, economists, and journalists. I mean, we get all the attention, that's true. But I can remember my father during World War II. He was head of a very large company called Clevite Corporation. My father was on War Production Board. And I remember someone telling me about my father that they too serve who stay at home. There are those in this world who really do the heavy lifting. And Tom Smith is one of those who really does the heavy lifting and makes all of this possible. And this evening, there are a number of you who do the heavy lifting. And I just want all of you to know just how grateful we all are to you for what you do. It's just wonderful. With regard to Tom Smith, his passion and drive and support for pro-growth economics is literally second to none. He's amazing. There was one he wanted me to have tonight, that we have a website called SaveTaxesByMoving.com, which is way cool. You ought to look it up. It's based on a lot of work that Steve Moore and Rex Sinkfield and Travis Brown and I have been doing on economics, but this one is all Tom Smith. You should see it. I'm the front man. He wrote it, he produced it, he directed it. It's phenomenal, and I just was the front man for Tom. If you look at this website, what we do in this is try to communicate to everyday normal people how they can better their own lives by trying to find locations where they're able to keep more of their own money. We look at all the states and all the locations in those states, and what you do is you put in your zip code, you put in your income, you put in your age, you put at the location which you're thinking of moving to, and it tells you how much in taxes you save each and every year. Then you tell them the type of returns you expect to get in your portfolios, and it tells you the total value of those savings by the time you retire. It is incredible. All of you tonight probably don't understand what I'm talking about because you're still in New York. But for someone who moved from Rancho Santa Fe, California, to Belmead, Tennessee, I can tell you what it really means. I bought my house in Belle Meade with my first year's tax savings. I put up pictures all over the walls of California beach scenes. I got the Beach Boys music playing in the background. I even have air sprayers filled with salty water so I can feel. And I waited for 3 years before I could go back and visit until the statute of limitations went. But this website is really neat. By the way, it'll also show you what you lose by moving from Belle Meade, Tennessee to Rancho Santa Fe, California. It's got your losses. This was Tom Smith's idea all the way. And when I tell you he wrote it, he directed it, and he produced it, I'm not kidding on that. You all know that what Tom Smith also did was he's got the von Hayek Book Award here at the Manhattan Institute. This is a man who eschews publicity. This is a man who believes with a passion. And even though he may not be a politician or an economist or a journalist, without him, none of this would work. Tom, I want to introduce you here for the Alexander Hamilton Award. Ladies and gentlemen, Tom Smith.
Thank you, Arthur, and thank you, Manhattan Institute, for this award. But I have a question. Why do you think Larry and Paul would ask someone with a name like Tom Smith to be up here tonight? We know everybody has to be someplace. As many of you well know that when you put on an event like tonight, the first thing you're concerned with is how to fill the room. Just maybe Paul and Larry were concerned that Congressman Ryan and Governor Bush wouldn't draw a big enough crowd, but look around and you see if that's what they thought. They were wrong. But if they thought someone with a name like Tom Smith would draw a crowd, you might want to rethink your contribution to the Manhattan Institute. That's only a joke, Larry. Regardless of how I got here, I'm delighted to be here tonight, particularly with Congressman Ryan and Governor Bush. Arthur pointed out that I started the Hayek Book Award at the Manhattan Institute. Hayek believed that ideas change the world. That's what the Manhattan Institute is all about. That's what our scholars devote their lives to. Hayek was very concerned about what he called the fatal conceit of intellectuals who tend to believe they should be planning life for everybody. To understand why Hayek labeled that conceit fatal, look no further than the housing debacle. A vast overallocation of resources by the federal government to seduce everyone to buy a home, whether they could afford it or not. Almost total control of the entire mortgage industry produced precisely the opposite of its intention, and much more. That overallocation caused housing prices to explode, seduced massive speculation and fraud. And who was hurt? The very people it was designed to help, those at the bottom. If they had to borrow more money to buy a home, it would then seem ever-increasing prices. Then the housing market collapsed. That was a life-changing event for them. In addition, that massive intrusion, that massive overallocation into the market produced a worldwide financial catastrophe that brought the economies of the Western world to a screeching halt. There's never been a more compelling, a more fatal, a more painful display of how fatal that conceit can be. But now we have Obamacare. The stated goal of Obamacare is in essence to improve the delivery of goods and services in 17 or 18% of the healthcare sector of the most successful economy in the history of man. With a law, 974 pages long. Put that in perspective, the Federal Reserve Act was 25 pages. Now only partially in place, some 15,000 pages and counting. Think of that, only partially in place, 15,000 pages of regulation, 974 pages in the original bill. Stack those pages on top of each other and you have a pile of paper almost 7 feet tall. Each one of those pages has several paragraphs. Each of those paragraphs will have to be diagnosed, that's not a pun, but enforced. Many will eventually be litigated. In the future, resources in 17 or 18% of the most successful economy in the history of man will be allocated to a great extent by a 7 feet tall and growing stack of paper. Ask yourself, is that an environment that encourages entrepreneurs and innovators? Or is that or is that an environment that encourages crony capitalism? And this is a critical distinction. Here's an example of just how critical that distinction can be. Think back only a few years. Not one expert, not one government policy entertained even the remotest possibility that the United States could ever be energy independent, that North America could have the largest reservoir of hydrocarbons in the world. The Central Planners intellectuals told us we need to invest billions of dollars of taxpayer money in alternative energy. Our president told us as recently as 3 years ago that we're running out of oil. But he said, don't worry, you can keep your doctor. I had to do that one. Today, we're rapidly becoming energy independent. We now know North America as the largest reservoir of hydrocarbons in the world. This is a world-changing event. How did this world-changing event take place? Obviously, not because of top-down planning. It happened in spite of top-down planning. This world-changing event, the shale revolution, was created by what Julian Simon called the ultimate resource, the human being, the human mind. A resource that's not only the ultimate resource, it's a resource widely distributed, without limits. It does not need to be either mined or drilled for. What it mainly needs is to be fertilized with freedom, with personal liberty, not a stack of paper 7 feet tall and growing. I'd like to close with one paragraph from Hayek's lecture, The Pretense of Knowledge, delivered in Stockholm in 1974, 40 years ago, when he was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics. I think the title, The Pretense of Knowledge, is a precise description of what caused the housing debacle. It's a precise description of Obamacare. Here's Hayek in 1974. If man is not to do more harm than good in his efforts to improve the social order, that's Obamacare. He will have to learn that in this, as in all other fields where the essential complexity of an organized kind prevails. He cannot acquire the full knowledge which will make mastery of events possible. He will therefore have to use which knowledge he can achieve, not to shape the results as a craftsman shapes his handiwork, but rather to cultivate a growth by providing the appropriate environment in a manner in which the gardener does this for his plants. There is a danger in the exuberant feeling of ever-growing power which the advance of physical science has engendered and which tempts man to try, dizzy with success, to subject not only our natural but our human environment to the control of human will. That's Obamacare. The recognition of the insuperable limits to his knowledge ought indeed teach the student of society a lesson of humility, which would guard him against becoming an accomplice in man's fatal striving to control society. That's Obamacare. A striving which makes him not only a tyrant or his fellows, but which may well make him the destroyer of a civilization which no brain has designed, but which has grown from the free efforts of millions of individuals. Thank you, Governor Bush. Thank you, Congressman Ryan, for taking the time, especially from your families, and your busy schedule to be with us tonight. Thank you.